You close your eyes, you're safe, you are in your bed, you're home, and then your brain decides to absolutely destroy you for the next 8 hours. Welcome to sleep, humanity's nightly voluntary blackout, where your subconscious gets to play God with zero supervision, no safety regulations, no content warnings, no terms of service. Tonight, we are diving into 11 confessions pulled straight from Reddit, the one place on the internet where people are just unhinged enough to type out their darkest, most disturbing, most bizarrely specific nightmares at 3 in the morning and hit post. Because misery, as it turns out, loves an audience. Some of these are terrifying, some are heartbreaking, some are deeply, profoundly weird in a way that will make you question what your brain is doing when you are not watching it. And all of them are real, so dim the lights, pull up your blanket, and maybe, just maybe, try to avoid thinking about what your subconscious has planned for you tonight. Stiff as a board, our first confessor goes by username Beautifile. They posted on r/nightmares, a subreddit that should probably be listed as mental health resource, with a very practical question. They are not here to tell you about the monster. They want a medical term because after waking up from a nightmare and finding every single muscle in their body locked rigid like a plank of petrified wood, they want to name it. Scientists, philosophers, artists, humanity has always had this urge to name the terrible things, gives us a sense of control. So let's hear it directly from the source. I had a nightmare last night, like I do almost every night. But last night I briefly woke up and all of my muscles were tense. I was stiff as a board for a moment. I couldn't believe how complete it was. Does anyone know if there's a term for when this happens? It reminds me of what they show on old movies of people getting electroshock treatment. Any help is appreciated. Oh, and yes, I do feel like complete caca today. There is a certain poetic devastation in ending a description of full-body muscular paralysis with the word caca, and before you ask, yes, there is actually a term for this. One Redditor responded to the OP that this might have to do with a stressful event or a stressful week, furthermore advising them to go see a doctor. Next Redditor theorized that this might be close to a generalized muscle tension during a nightmare arousal. What Beautifile likely experienced is called REM, sleep behavior disorder, or the muscular response known as sleep myoclonus or hypnic jerk, a phenomenon where your nervous system basically fires all guns at once as you transition between sleep stages. Your body, confused and overstimulated by whatever nightmare it was running from, essentially tried to physically act out of the dream. Every muscle fiber recruited full broadcast. The electroshock comparison is genuinely accurate. During intense nightmare states, your sympathetic nervous system floods you with cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart races, your muscles tense. Your body doesn't know the difference between a nightmare and a real threat. It responds the same way. So yes, You feel like caca today because your body just ran a marathon from an invisible monster while you were supposed to be resting. And it does this every night. Papa, please help me. User successful algae for 19 came to r/dreams not because they were scared, not because they were sad. They came because they were confused, and somehow that's more unsettling. There is context you need here. This person lost their childhood dog, not to old age, not to illness, but to a shooting incident, crossfire. The dog got a bullet that wasn't meant for anyone. And in the wake of that grief, our poster did what a lot of people do. They made choices that weren't great. Drinking, heavy drug use, rage, burned relationships. The whole human in free fall started back. They say they have cleaned themselves up. They are better now, living healthy. And then the dream keeps coming back. The most notable occurrence, March 8, 2026, just a few days ago. I awoke in an asylum with my bed at the end of the corridor. On the other side, I saw a dog that looked like my childhood dog, same fur and stuff. But something was different. Something was wrong. All I would hear is the buzzing noise of the AC unit next to me, while the dog would stare blankly into my soul. Suddenly, I hear the distorted voice, sounding like something you would hear listening to an old VHS tape, asking me, "Help me. Why won't you help me? Papa, please help me. Help me." The dog stands up, not like how a household pet you grew up with stands up asking for a treat. The dog stood up like it was human, walking towards me. And once it came closer and closer with each of its nails scraping the floor, I saw its face, distorted and disfigured, like some mad scientist tried to make a dog with flesh you find at a cattle slaughterhouse, teeth as white as the wall surrounding me, slowly opening his mouth, and as I anticipate, I blink and I am in a different room, surrounded by different breeds of dogs, all of them screaming like the Half-Life 2 zombies, screaming, "God help, please help," and straight in front of me was the same dog looking even more like a monster, longer limbs, more distorted face. The screams lasted a few seconds, then all of a sudden it turned silent. The dog still there, and that thing still watching me, and all it says before I suddenly awake is, "I see you." And that would be enough, right? That would be plenty. Wake up from that, check your phone, see it's 3:45 a.m. and just exist quietly in the dark for a while, perfectly reasonable, except that when he turned to check on his sleeping wife, the dog was standing in front of her, just there in the bedroom, the real bedroom, and then gone. And then, because apparently we hadn't hit the full horror bingo card yet, he hears harmonica in the kitchen, sees a figure sprint through the dark, and finds his stove was left on. The stove was on. Now, here's the thing. The stove was probably left on by his wife, who baked salmon. That's almost certainly what happened. The rational explanation exists, but try telling that to your nervous system at 3:45 in the morning, when a dead dog just spoke to you in a VHS voice and called you Papa. One Redditor responded saying OP might be suffering from PTSD. The other replied to the comment saying OP should do an EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing for further details on his trauma. Others said it must have been a spirit of torment has access on him from an open door created by his past. Another one presumed he might have lost his dog in his childhood. Grief, as it turns out, doesn't just sit quietly in therapy journals. Sometimes it manifests as a cosmic horror entity, wearing your childhood pet's face and asking why you didn't save it. The subconscious, absolutely no chill, zero mercy, none. The Black Cat. User Memoriat brings us a childhood classic, not in a comforting way, but in a "this haunted me every week for years" way, posted in r/nightmares, ages 4 to 7. That developmental window where children are absorbing everything from language, social rules, shapes, colors, the approximate size of a predator that could eat them whole. Perfectly normal to have recurring nightmares at that age. Perfectly normal. This nightmare had rules, it had consistency, and it had one very specific detail that makes it genuinely fascinating from a psychological standpoint. It was always the same, except for one small thing. When I was really little, maybe 4 to 7 years old, I would have this one recurring nightmare like once a week. It feels like it was very simple. I would go over to my grandparents' house for some reason. There would be lots of people there, like we were having a party. Then suddenly there would be these loud thumps that literally shook the ground and the house. It was a big old black cat, bigger than the house, coming for me, and I would hide. It was weird because the dream was always the same except for one small detail. One time it was Easter, the other time one of my teachers was at the house. A fence appeared on the front lawn. Stuff like that, small things that didn't matter, but something was always different, and I thought that was interesting. Anyway, in these dreams, the cat would always be looking for me to try and eat and kill me. The only reason why the dreams stopped is because the cat eventually did find me. I hid behind the door in my playroom, but on the opposite side of the door was a window to the outside open. The cat slowly lowered its massive head down and stared at me through the window, its eye almost taking up the entire window frame. I don't know how, but it opened up its mouth and painstakingly moved towards me to eat me. I woke up right after that, and I've never had that dream since. The dreams stopped because the cat found him. Let that settle in for a moment. Not because he woke up, not because he escaped, not because he found a way to fight back. The nightmares stopped because the creature won. Because hiding week after week, the child's subconscious finally decided, apparently, that the chase was over. Dream researchers would call this something along the lines of a narrative resolution, where a recurring dream continues until the underlying psychological tension finds some kind of symbolic conclusion. The cat represented something that was hunting him, something he couldn't escape, and when the dream finally played out to its grim, inevitable ending, the fear was complete, processed, done. And he moved into that same playroom years later, the exact room where, as a child, the house-sized nightmare predator ate him. He says he finds that kind of fun, incredible attitude genuinely. I am physically exhausted. Username outside grass toucher came to r/nightmares with a statement that isn't a question. It isn't asking for help. It's a dispatch from the front lines. He's almost 30. He has nightmares several times a week, sleep paralysis at least monthly. He has, as a grown adult man, urinated out of pure fear in his sleep multiple times. He says he doesn't take medications and gets enough sleep. His brain simply doesn't care. This particular one was first person. The world was vibrating, and I could feel like something bad was gonna happen. So in my dream, I tried to get up and turn on my light, but I could feel the energy get sucked out of me with every movement and fell to the floor and blacked out before I could reach my light, and woke up in the same position, same scenario, as in I woke up still dreaming, did same actions, but I got closer to the light. The third iteration, I reached the light, tried to flip it on, and it wouldn't turn on. This time when my vision was fading and I was falling to the floor, I saw an extremely long neck with the head of black hair sticking 5 feet out of my closet door. Then I woke up for real, but I couldn't move. I started yelling for someone to help me, but it came out as a whisper. Then after a minute, I could move again. One Redditor commented he also experienced eerily familiar to this and asked the OP to write 3 details pertaining to the nightmare, along with a small wind cue before sleeping, and telling the OP it might be because of nervous system overload and is asking for a steadier ground. OP from the first confession beauty file commented they have been using True Vega Plus, which is for writing the nervous system, along with a nausea drug called Odensetron, which didn't work out with them, whilst pleading him not to take this as a medical advice since they aren't a doctor. A false awakening nested inside a nightmare, nested inside sleep paralysis, nested inside the routine horror of being this particular human being. The light that won't turn on is one of the most reported dream phenomena in history. Your dream brain cannot stimulate working light switches because light and visual logic require parts of the prefrontal cortex that are largely offline during REM sleep. The world your subconscious builds is a stage set with fake props, and when you reach for the light, for safety, for normalcy, for one concrete thing to work, the dream refuses. The prop is hollow, and then from the closet, a neck, 5 feet of neck, head of black hair. He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't need to. He also casually mentions other nightmares in his archive, watching a man dissolve in a lake while trying to pull him out, watching a man get his face caved in and return as a creature, and having a conversation with a boy who opened his mouth so wide that the room became the interior of the boy's mouth. The room became the mouth. I don't know what this man's brain has against him. I genuinely don't. But whatever he did in his past life, he's clearly paying for it. I'm so freaking sick of this. This post comes from a deleted account, which, if anything, feels thematically appropriate. Posted on r/nightmares 3 nights in a row of the same nightmare, plus a nightmare nap. Big yikes. This person is not having a good week. They lead with, I'm so fucking sick of this, and I respect that. Skip the preamble. Get to the emotional core. 5 words. Done. I was riding a bus, and it stopped at a stop. It started driving again, but people noticed that nobody was actually driving it anymore. It was headed towards a bridge that was up and impassable. It sped up so quickly that it terrified me and everyone else. I jumped out and managed to bend physics because it's a dream. And then I rested at the shop for a bit. Next, I guess I decided to get back on the bus, which was just outside. Me and one other person got on. I think I tried to keep it from going and get back off, but where there was now someone sitting in the driver's seat and he wouldn't let us off. He quickly sped off and I jumped out eventually with this other guy. We hit a fence and he died from the impact. I survived and ran around the corner where the bus driver began chasing me. I threw a grenade and it was useless. Haha, dream moment. Then he kept getting closer and closer. As I got close to the freeway, my mission was to be close to the other people so they could save me from him. He ended up wrestling with me as I could barely move after hitting the fence, and I don't remember anything else. They add at the end, I have trauma and serious mental illness. Honestly, I'm doing worse than ever before. And then the terror I feel in these dreams makes me feel completely empty and hopeless after I wake up. It's like I already accepted my death just to be surprised that I'm not dead, just wishing I was. That last line, that one I want you to sit with, not the runaway bus, not a dead stranger, not a useless grenade, which, for the record, is a perfect encapsulation of what it feels like to try and solve a mental health crisis with the tools you have available. You throw what you have got, it doesn't work. The thing keeps coming. No, the line that matters is this: waking up and wishing you hadn't. Why now? User Spiri5899 posted with a genuinely sincere hope you all sleep well at the end, which is either deeply ironic or the most optimistic thing posted to r/nightmares in its entire history. This person has been having nightmares every night for 2 months. They never had nightmares before. They moved to a new country to study. They struggled, adapted, now love their life. Their school is brutal and demanding, and their dreams have decided to schedule the reckoning. The dreams are not necessarily cruel or horror movie-like. They are usually taking fears or even mundane daily life scenarios from my unconsciousness and put them into a nightmare that comes very close to reality. Mostly I feel uncomfortable, anxious, and especially stressed during these dreams. Currently, I am very happy with my life though. There was a big change though, because half a year ago, I moved to another country to start my studies, and in the beginning I struggled quite hard to adapt to my new life and make friends. Now it finally feels good and right. The only reason I could explain my nightmares is my current stress level. I'm going to a high-pressure school that demands a high workload. My life is filled with school work every single day until 10 p.m. and on the weekends, rarely having a moment off. I read a lot about Carl Jung in my self-studies, so I know the theories about shadow work and dream symbolisms. I'm very sure that the topics of my dreams are reflecting my shadows. I just wonder why now. Why does my unconsciousness want to work with my shadows now, even though I don't have the energy for it? It literally takes my energy. Why now? Great question. Love that they asked it. Here's your answer, delivered with enthusiasm of someone who has read too much about sleep research at 2 a.m. because your conscious life finally got good enough that your brain felt safe enough to open the filling cabinet. The human psyche, and Jung would agree with this, doesn't process difficult experiences when you are in the middle of them. It can't afford to. When you are drowning, you don't also schedule a therapy session. You swim. It's only once you have got your breath that the water starts to feel cold. You spend 6 months in survival mode. New country, new language, new social structures, new academic pressure, your shadow, your unprocessed fears, your buried anxieties, your unconfronted vulnerabilities had to wait in the lobby. Now things are good. Now you're stable and your psyche has decided. Great, finally, now we have time to deal with all of this. The cruelest part of psychological growth is that it doesn't wait until you're ready. It starts when you're stable enough to survive it. Congratulations, you are healing. It looks like nightmares. You are doing great. The silence. J Payday 2 posted on r/dreams, and this one's different because this one doesn't have a monster. It doesn't have a creature. It doesn't have someone chasing you or something wearing a human face. It just has a room and silence. And somehow this is the entry that I think will haunt the most people watching this. The dream I'm going to write about was from when I was very little, still sleeping with my parents. In the dream, I was in the biggest room of my home at night, which has 3 open corridors on opposite walls. The light was on, but only in that room, so the corridors were just pitch black, like the Five Nights at Freddy 4 ones, but without doors. The more time I stayed there, the more the silence grew louder. Man, how does silence grow in volume, bruh? Please explain. And my fear rose. It was incredibly long and excruciating. This dream, I was the most scared, horrified, terrified, paranoid, helpless, and disturbed I ever was in my entire life. At one point, still trying to scream with tears running down my eyes, I got down in the corner and my heart started beating so fast that I just woke up. When I woke up, I was crying, screaming, and my heart was pounding. Ever since then, I have had similar nightmares often. The silence grew louder. There's a concept in horror called the dread of the empty threshold. The fear isn't what you see in the dark corridor. It's that you can't see anything. It's the potential of the dark. The corridors in this dream weren't threatening because of what was in them. They were threatening because they were open. They were waiting and nothing came through. And all this child wanted in the dream and in waking life was to scream for their parents, to call for safety, for someone who loves you to hear you and come running. But the sound wouldn't come. They were alone in the bright room, surrounded by black doorways, and the silence kept getting louder. If you have screamed in a dream and heard only a whisper, you know exactly what this is. And if you haven't, congratulations, you have been warned. My grandfather's eyes. User The Megalodon posted because, and I quote, "I need to get it off my chest." Context: their grandfather is in the hospital, has been in and out for 2 years. They live 10 hours away. They got the call the night before the dream. They went to sleep carrying news that didn't have any resolution yet. And then the dream. We are at my grandpa's funeral and I asked to see his casket. I'm in a Facebook group called Beauty of the Dead and I wanted to take a photo of my grandpa so I could remember him one last time, remembering the people who do it in that group. Obviously, in my dream, I'm crying as I go to see my grandpa's casket. It's a gold casket with glass on top so you can see into the casket. As I lift my phone to take a photo, my grandfather's eyes shoot open and I scream and step back. My grandmother comes over and I tell her this and she says it's normal after that through her own tears. But I keep saying this doesn't feel normal. I don't remember exactly what happened after this, but the next part I remember is that I lift my phone back up to take a photo and my grandfather's eyes shoot open again and he starts looking back and forth, then starts screaming in what I assume to be fear, which causes me to start screaming and sobbing as my grandmother just tries to comfort me. There's a particular cruelty in grief anticipation dreams. You haven't lost the person yet. You are afraid you're going to, and your brain, with its infinite generosity, decides to skip straight to the funeral and then, because that wasn't enough, animate the corpse. The grandfather screaming in the casket isn't a horror villain. He is screaming in fear. The dreamer interpreted this correctly, instinctively. This is not a monster. This is someone scared. This is someone who doesn't want to be where they are, which is somehow much worse. Grief doesn't just hurt you in the present tense. It arrives early. It sends previews. It rehearses the loss before you have had the chance to experience it. The crowd outside. This entry has a kind of meta horror to it. Not because the content is terrifying, but because of what it reveals about the fundamental unreliability of your own perception. User Worried Examination 93 was watching YouTube, decided to rest, felt like he closed his eyes for 10 minutes. Then he sat up and looked out the window. After what felt like was only 10 minutes later, I heard some noise outside my apartment and I sat up and looked out my window, and there was a huge crowd of people outside my window. I knew immediately after seeing it that it wasn't real. I considered the possibility that I was dreaming, but I decided I probably wasn't. I laid down and then sat back up 2 or 3 more times, and the crowd was still there. At the time, I was convinced I was hallucinating, but given the fogginess of that memory, I'm now thinking that it was probably a self-aware false awakening dream. It's kind of ironic how the dreams that I would think that I would be most likely to go lucid in, I actually fail to realize I'm dreaming specifically because of how real they feel. He knew it wasn't real. He knew. And then decided he probably wasn't dreaming anyway. This is the trap. This is the specific mechanism by which the dreaming brain defeats the rational mind. The false awakening is so seamlessly constructed. Same room, same light, same furniture, same physical sensation of sitting up, that the fact that a crowd of people appeared in the street below is not processed as impossible. It's processed as unusual, and unusual things happen in waking life. He checked multiple times, laid down, sat up, did that over and over again. The crowd was consistent, persistent, stable, exactly how a real event would be. And so his brain concluded, okay, crowd, weird, but probably real. One Redditor commented, doubting this as a dream, and it could have been an actual crowd. Another one said they dreamed exactly like this, so much that they could draw a map at this point, including locations of stores and bars. Another one said these might be hallucinations occasionally after a stressful dream, but they usually fade out in 10 or 20 seconds. This other individual said they dreamt about waking up in their room a lot, and the only way they could figure out was by looking at the furniture, which were usually broken or in the wrong places, things missing or stuff that didn't belong there. The most terrifying false awakenings aren't the ones where the room is wrong. They are the ones where everything is exactly right except for one thing that your dreaming brain just quietly accepts as normal. His insight at the end is the real horror. The dreams most likely to trigger lucidity are the ones most likely to feel real, and feeling real is exactly the thing that prevents you from realizing you're dreaming. Sleep is a trap designed by your own brain, and it's very, very good at what it does. Why the hell am I dreaming this? User Markow 1998 posted what was clearly an ungodly hour, prefaced with a language warning, and ended with, "Now that I got this off my chest, I'm going back to sleep. Thank you. Good night." The dream involves their sister and her children, a niece and nephew they clearly adore, and a baby that keeps getting younger. In this dream, my niece is seen holding and taking care of a baby. I'm unsure if my sister had another kid or if it belongs to a close friend of hers. My niece loves babies, holding them and talking to them in a high-pitched voice throughout the dream. However, I noticed the baby getting younger, a Benjamin Button type thing. That's when the dread starting setting in. What happens when the baby becomes unborn? How will these innocent children react? And why the fuck am I dreaming this? Eventually, the baby goes away and my niece is upset. She goes around the house trying to look for it, making a lot of loud sounds. I can't see my sister, but I imagine she's very upset. So I try to get my niece to stop making so much noise, but then she goes into the bedroom and opens the trash can. I couldn't even fathom my niece's full reaction. She just looked into the trash can and said, "Baby?" I didn't see it. I didn't know what was in there, but I imagine it was really ugly and traumatic. "Baby?" 4 letters, 1 question mark. Possibly the most effective horror writing in this entire video. And it was typed at 3 in the morning by someone who wanted to go back to sleep and didn't have time to workshop it. The dream is tapping into something visceral and ancient. The fear of loss before loss. The terror of watching something precious become less. The horror of innocence, a child looking for a baby she was just holding, encountering something that was never meant for her to see. After everything went static and blurry, like a cheap ring edit, as the poster themselves describes. They woke up asking why. Why would their brain serve this up? What possible purpose does this serve? What algorithm is running in the subconscious of that thought? And that, ultimately, is the existential question that ties together every single entry on this list. Why does the sleeping brain do this to us? I dreamed my death. We are ending on user Majestic Accident 962 because this one doesn't stay in the dream. Some years ago, they were going through a rough patch of nightmares, couldn't sleep, constantly scared, and during this period, they had prophetic dreams, things they dreamed that happened the next day, internet theories they dreamed before discovering them online, and then one dream, specific and vivid. I was on vacation with my mom and best friend. We were staying at a hotel on a beach. I think lots of palm trees, one big white hotel. I remember it perfectly. I remember being on the hotel roof when suddenly I fell. I don't know if someone pushed me or it was accidental. I woke up but didn't give so much importance to the dream because I had a lot of nightmares at the time. So that wasn't uncommon. After maybe 6 months, I had the exact same dream. It was similar, same place, same death, same persons. Fast forward to the next week. I was talking to my mother about going on a vacation. She started searching places to go. First place she showed me, the place from my dreams, the place where I died 2 times in my dreams. I immediately said no without an explanation. That happened 2 years ago. I still wonder, what if we went there? Would I be dead now? Would I be dead now? They said no. They gave no explanation. They just refused, and they are still here 2 years later, posting on Reddit about it. Now, rationally, statistically, the answer to would you have died is almost certainly no. Humans go on vacations to beach hotels constantly and fall off roofs with remarkable rarity. The dream was almost certainly coincidence. The location match was almost certainly a version of the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. We notice the things we are primed to notice, probably, but they said no, and they are still here. Sometimes the nightmare is the warning. Sometimes the subconscious assembles a picture from fragments you didn't know you had collected. Sometimes a dream is just noise and static. And sometimes, very rarely, in the parts of human experience we can't fully explain, a dream is something else entirely. They don't know which one this was. Neither do I. Neither do you. 11 confessions, 11 people, countless sleepless nights. Welcome to the interior of the human mind, the place you're locked in, inside every night, whether you wanna be or not. Here's what we know broadly. Nightmares are your brain's threat processing engine running in overdrive. They are emotional waste management. They are memory consolidation gone sideways. They are stress finding, the emergency exit. They are, in the clinical sense, adaptive. Here's what we also know. Knowing that doesn't make them less terrifying. You can understand exactly why your brain serves you a Half-Life 2 zombie dog with a disfigured face at 3 a.m. and it will do absolutely nothing to make your experience more comfortable. That impulse to post, to share, to ask, did this happen to anyone else? That's one of the most human things there is. If you have made it to the end of this, congrats. You are brave, or you are a masochist, or both, which honestly is the correct disposition for being alive. If any of these stories resonated in a way that goes beyond, creepy. If you are dealing with chronic nightmares, sleep paralysis, or disturbing, intrusive thoughts, please talk to someone, a therapist, a doctor, a friend at 3 a.m. The darkness is more manageable when someone else knows you are in it. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone you want to deeply unsettle before bedtime. And whatever you do tonight, try to sleep well.